Imagine a world where the most powerful secrets aren't locked away in deep vaults or guarded by armies, but hidden right before our eyes, encoded into the very fabric of everyday objects, carefully indexed and preserved with such brilliance that they outlived the empires that tried to erase them. This isn't a fantasy or a work of fiction, it's the incredible true story of the Knights Templar, one of history's most mysterious and influential orders, and the revolutionary system they crafted to protect knowledge against the relentless tides of time, war, and oppression. Their methods were so advanced, so layered with meaning and purpose, that they didn't just save documents. They built a legacy that echoes into our modern age, shaping how we think about information, secrecy, and survival itself. In this video, we're setting out on a journey into the heart of medieval ingenuity as we explore the lost indexes, how Templars tagged knowledge to outlast empires. We'll pull back the curtain on the tools and techniques they used to categorize, conceal, and conserve their vast archives, methods that included symbolic coding, geographic references, linguistic encryption, and even oral traditions designed to endure where written words might fail. You'll see how their systems allowed them to manage everything from sacred texts and financial ledgers to military intelligence and maps, creating a web of knowledge so resilient that it continued to whisper its secrets long after the Templars themselves had fallen from power. What makes this story so compelling isn't just the mystery or the romance of hidden treasure, though there's plenty of that. It's the stunning relevance these ancient strategies hold for us today. In an era where we grapple with data overload, digital security, and the fragility of information, the Templars offer timeless lessons in durability, organization, and foresight. By understanding how they tagged knowledge to survive empires, we gain insight into our own challenges and opportunities. So join us as we decode one of history's most fascinating intellectual puzzles and discover how a medieval brotherhood of warrior monks can help us navigate the complexities of the digital age. In the year 1119, a small group of 9 knights, led by a French nobleman named Hugues de Payens, made a solemn vow in Jerusalem. Their initial mission was deceptively simple: to protect Christian pilgrims traveling along the dangerous roads to the Holy Land. These roads were plagued by bandits and marauders, and the journey was a perilous one. Dedicating themselves to a life of poverty, chastity, and obedience, they called themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, a name we now shorten to the Knights Templar. They were given quarters on the Temple Mount, believed to be the site of King Solomon's temple, which is where their famous name originates. This humble beginning, however, was like a single spark that would ignite a blaze across the medieval world. Their reputation for courage and unwavering dedication spread rapidly. Within a very short time, they received the official endorsement of the Church at the Council of Troyes in 1129, which gave them a powerful religious mandate and a unique set of rules to live by. Donations of land and money began pouring in from pious nobles across Europe who wanted to support this holy cause. What started as a small band of protectors soon transformed into something much, much larger. The Templars evolved into a formidable military order, a highly disciplined fighting force that became the shock troops of the Crusades. They were often at the vanguard of key battles, renowned for their ferocity and their refusal to surrender. A legend says that the last Templar on the field at the Battle of La Fourbe in 1244 was found surrounded by the bodies of slain enemies, still fighting despite numerous wounds. But their influence stretched far beyond the battlefield. They established a vast economic network, becoming pioneers of international finance. Pilgrims could deposit funds at a Templar commandery in London, and withdraw them in Jerusalem using a coded letter of credit, a system that protected them from theft on their long journeys. This innovative banking service made the order incredibly wealthy and trusted. This immense flow of wealth and responsibility required a physical presence. The Templars built a sprawling network of commanderies, preceptories, and farms that stretched from the British Isles to the shores of the Holy Land. These were not just military outposts, they were economic hubs, agricultural centers, and administrative headquarters. Each one generated records, deeds for land, records of harvests, details of loans, inventories of supplies, and correspondence with other commanderies. The volume of information they had to manage was staggering for the era, and it wasn't just about money and grain. Their travels and their presence at the crossroads of Europe and the Middle East exposed them to a wide array of knowledge. They encountered advanced Islamic scholarship, Byzantine engineering, and ancient texts. They began collecting and studying maps, religious works, architectural plans, and potentially even esoteric knowledge. Their archive became a treasure trove of intellectual property. This combination of immense wealth, vast geographic reach, and a growing repository of sensitive knowledge created an urgent and pressing need. They needed a way to organize it all, to protect it from physical threats like fire or invasion, and to shield their most valuable secrets from rivals and enemies. The sheer scale of their operation meant that traditional methods of record-keeping were completely inadequate. They had to invent a better system, and that necessity became the mother of their most ingenious invention, a complex, multi-layered method of indexing knowledge designed to survive any catastrophe. Within the stone walls of their commanderies, the Templars amassed what might be considered one of the most significant and diverse collections of knowledge in the medieval world. This was far more than a simple library. It was a living, breathing central nervous system for their entire operation. Think of it not as a dusty attic filled with forgotten scrolls, but as the high-tech server room of its day, constantly accessed, updated, and referenced. The scope of what they collected was breathtaking in its variety. Detailed financial ledgers recorded transactions with kings and commoners alike, tracking vast sums of money moving across continents. Meticulously drawn maps charted not only pilgrimage routes and holy sites, but also trade networks, safe harbors, and strategic points of interest known only to the Order. Alongside these practical documents were religious texts, including rare copies of scripture, theological commentaries, and liturgical manuals that guided their daily spiritual life. There is also strong evidence to suggest they gathered more esoteric knowledge treatises on architecture, mathematics, and astronomy, absorbed from Islamic and Byzantine scholars they encountered in the East, and perhaps even works on ancient philosophies or healing arts. This archive was the ultimate tool for governance. A commander in a remote outpost in Cyprus could receive instructions, along with referenced documents on local customs and resource availability, allowing him to rule effectively. For trade, it provided the data needed to set fair prices, manage supply lines, and verify the authenticity of letters of credit. In strategy, it held the intelligence reports on political shifts, military strengths, and weaknesses of both allies and adversaries. The physical safeguarding of this priceless repository was a paramount concern. These were not quiet, open halls of learning like a university library. The Templar archives were integrated into the most secure parts of their fortified structures. Libraries and scriptoria, the rooms where scribes tirelessly copied and annotated documents, were often located deep within a fortress, perhaps in a windowless chamber beneath a chapel or behind multiple guarded passageways. The architecture itself was a defense, with thick stone walls designed to resist fire, siege engines, and the relentless passage of time. The famous Paris Temple, their European headquarters, was said to house an immense archive within its imposing keep, a tower that symbolized their power and security. In the East, their headquarters on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem was not just a spiritual center but undoubtedly a major hub for this intellectual activity, a place where knowledge from across Christendom and the Muslim world could be gathered and synthesized. The sheer volume of information they managed is almost unimaginable for the era, all processed without the aid of paper, let alone computers. Every transaction, every report, every map required precious parchment and laborious hours of handwriting. This immense burden of information is what made their next innovation not just a luxury, but an absolute necessity for survival. They needed a way to navigate this sea of data quickly, to find a single piece of intelligence amidst thousands of documents, and to do it all under the pressure of imminent threats. The system they developed to manage this chaos, to tag and index their entire world of knowledge, would be their most enduring and revolutionary creation. To truly appreciate the Templars' genius, we must first step into the dimly lit, perilous world of medieval information management, a world they had to conquer. Every single sheet of parchment, the primary writing surface, was a valuable commodity. It wasn't paper, it was the carefully scraped and treated skin of a sheep or goat, a labor-intensive process that made it expensive and far from disposable. Ink had to be meticulously crafted from gallnuts, gum, and pigments, and the scribe wielding the quill, he was a highly skilled artisan, one of a small minority in a society where widespread literacy was centuries away. Simply creating a single record was a costly investment of time and resources. Beyond the challenge of creation lay the ever-present threat of annihilation. Fortresses and monasteries, the primary repositories of knowledge, were constantly vulnerable. A single careless candle could, and often did, lead to a catastrophic fire, reducing years of painstaking work to ashes in minutes. Warfare was a constant reality. Invading armies would loot and burn, seeing archives not as treasures to preserve but as symbols of power to be erased. Theft was a risk from rivals or even from within, and then there was the silent, slow enemy, decay. Dampness could cause parchment to mold and rot, ink could fade, and rodents or insects could devour the very fibers of history. For most, the loss of records meant the loss of memory, of legal claims, of identity. For the Knights Templar, these universal medieval hazards were magnified by their own unique position. Their immense wealth and power made them a target for envy. They had political enemies in royal courts who coveted their financial influence and rivals within other military orders who competed for papal favor. Their archives didn't just hold land deeds and prayer books, they contained the intimate financial secrets of kings, the strategic blueprints for military campaigns, and potentially sensitive religious interpretations. If these records fell into the wrong hands, it wouldn't just be an inconvenience, it could provide the very ammunition needed for their destruction. The protection of their knowledge was, in every sense, a direct matter of their survival as an organization. Now contrast this fragile reality with our modern world. We live in an age of seemingly limitless digital storage, where we can create 1,000 perfect copies of a document with a click and send them across the globe in seconds. Our data is backed up on remote servers protected by encryption and accessible from a device in our pocket. The Templars had none of this. They couldn't make easy copies. Every duplicate had to be handwritten. They couldn't transmit information instantly. A message from Jerusalem to London traveled for weeks by horse and ship, vulnerable to interception or loss at sea. They had to build durability into the system itself, designing their knowledge to be resilient, portable, and discreet using only the tools they had. Their solutions, born from this crucible of constant threat, reveal a profound and almost prophetic understanding of how to make information last forever. So what exactly was this system? When we hear the word index today, we might picture the alphabetical list at the back of a book, a simple tool for finding a page number. But for the Templars, indexing was something far more sophisticated and powerful. It was a dynamic, multi-layered architecture for knowledge. In their hands, an index became a living map, a secret code, and a durable preservation strategy all rolled into one. Think of it not as a table of contents, but as a sophisticated web of connections. A single document in their archive wouldn't just have one tag. It would be linked through a system of cross-references to other related texts, perhaps a map from a different commandery and a financial ledger from a decade prior. They used symbols as visual metadata, instantly communicating a document's theme, its level of secrecy, or its point of origin. A small, seemingly decorative mark in the margin could tell an initiated brother that this particular prayer book contained sensitive financial data related to a specific noble family, and that its companion map was stored in a hidden compartment beneath a certain floor tile in the Paris temple. This was about creating relationships between pieces of information, allowing them to reconstruct complex knowledge from fragments if the main archive was ever lost. Crucially, their indexing was a form of active encryption. It wasn't designed just for efficiency, it was a security protocol. By weaving their own symbolic language and cross-referential codes into the fabric of their records, they ensured that even if an enemy or a spy got their hands on a document, its true meaning and connections would remain utterly opaque. To an outsider, a ledger was just a list of numbers and names. To a Templar clerk, those same numbers, paired with a specific glyph next to them, could indicate the interest rate on a loan to a king, the collateral held in a distant fortress, and the scheduled shipment date for repayment. The information was hidden in plain sight, its value protected by a layer of interpretation known only to the Order. The physical execution of this system was a testament to their craftsmanship. They employed coded marginalia, tiny annotations and symbols drawn in the blank spaces of parchment that acted as discrete tags. Books were sometimes crafted with hidden compartments or double bindings, allowing sensitive indexed summaries or maps to be concealed within the covers of an otherwise innocuous religious text. They created elaborate symbolic diagrams, circular charts that mapped relationships between concepts, people, and places, serving as both a memory aid and a master key for understanding how their knowledge was interconnected. This wasn't just paperwork, it was a form of artisanal data engineering. The ultimate test of any system is how it performs under pressure, and the Templar indexing shone brightest in a crisis. Imagine a messenger arriving at a commandery with urgent news of an impending attack. The commander didn't need to waste precious hours sifting through chests of unsorted scrolls. He could go directly to the section tagged with the relevant geographic symbol, cross-reference it with the ledgers marked for military supplies, and retrieve the maps annotated with safe routes and fortified locations, all within minutes. This rapid retrieval of contextualized intelligence could mean the difference between a successful defense and a catastrophic defeat. It turned their archives from a passive library into an active strategic weapon. In this light, we can see their work not as a relic of a superstitious age, but as a direct precursor to the logical structures that power our modern world. The relational links they created between data points are the philosophical ancestors of the hyperlinks we click on every day. Their use of symbolic metadata mirrors the tags we use to organize our digital photos and files. Their entire system, designed for efficient storage, secure retrieval, and contextual understanding, was a manual, parchment-based version of a relational database management system. They were grappling with the same fundamental problems of information science that we do now, and their solutions, crafted from vellum and ink, were nothing short of revolutionary. Now let's explore the first and perhaps most visually striking of their methods, symbolic tagging. The Templars transformed ordinary symbols into a sophisticated organizational language, turning their iconic imagery into a functional filing system. Their most famous emblem, the cross pate with its flared arms, served far more than a decorative or devotional purpose. This cross wasn't merely stamped on documents at random. Its specific placement, size, and even color variation could convey precise metadata about the contents. A large red cross pate in the top margin might indicate a document of highest secrecy related to military operations, while a smaller black version in the bottom corner could tag a routine agricultural inventory from a particular region. This visual shorthand allowed a Templar scribe to instantly assess the nature and sensitivity of a record without reading a single word. Their battle standard, the bocinte, that stark black and white banner, also found its way into their indexing system. The dichotomy of black and white was powerfully symbolic, but practically, it could be used to categorize documents by urgency or outcome. A white field with a small black mark might denote a successful completed transaction, while a document edged in black could signal a debt owed or a pending threat. This binary coding created immediate visual triggers for action or caution, streamlining the process of prioritizing information in a world where time was often a scarce commodity. The genius of this system lay in its subtle integration into everyday objects. Symbols weren't just boldly drawn on the front of scrolls where any prying eye might see them. They were embedded into the very fabric of their materials. In illuminated manuscripts, a particular floral pattern in the border, unique to the artisan of a specific commandery, could silently attest to the document's origin. On maps, a tiny, stylized lamb near a coastline might not look like a symbol to an outsider, but to an initiated brother, it indicated a safe harbor or a friendly contact in that port city. The most sensitive tags were often hidden in plain sight within architectural details. A specific knot design carved into a ceiling beam above a doorway could indicate that important records were stored behind that wall, while the pattern of tiles on the floor might form a large, invisible to outsiders cross that pointed toward a hidden repository. This method served a brilliant dual purpose. On one level, it was a ruthlessly efficient organizational tool. A brother transferring from a commandery in France to one in Cyprus could immediately understand the filing system because he was fluent in this silent, symbolic language. He could walk into a new archive and, by reading the margins of the documents, quickly locate the intelligence reports or financial ledgers he needed. There was no need for lengthy written explanations that could be intercepted or misunderstood. The symbols transcended language barriers within the order, creating a universal system of knowledge management. On another level, these symbols were powerful markers of identity and belonging. Using them reinforced a shared culture and a sense of exclusive membership. Knowing the meaning of a hidden mark was a form of initiation, a way to distinguish a true brother from an outsider or a novice. This created a layer of psychological security. Even if someone gained physical access to a document, they lacked the cultural key to decipher its true organizational category. The symbol itself was a silent sentinel, guarding the information it helped to organize. This elegant fusion of practical utility and covert security allowed the Templars to communicate volumes of complex information with a single, swift glance, ensuring their operations remained both efficient and enigmatic. While symbolic tagging provided a universal language for categorization, The Templars also mastered a second, incredibly practical method: geographic coding. They understood that knowledge is often tied to place, and by anchoring information to specific locations, they created a system that was both intuitive and incredibly resilient. This wasn't just about drawing maps, it was about creating a living, breathing spatial index where the landscape itself became a filing cabinet. A document about the annual wool yield from their estates in Poitou, France, for instance, wouldn't just be filed under agriculture. It would be tagged with a geographic code, perhaps a unique symbol representing that specific region, immediately linking it to maps of the local terrain, ledgers from nearby commanderies, and even reports on the political loyalties of the local nobility. This created a rich, multi-layered context that simple lists could never provide. Their maps were the centerpiece of this system, but they were far from ordinary. To an untrained eye, a Templar map might look like a typical medieval chart, with coastlines and mountains drawn with charming inaccuracy. But to an initiated brother, that same map was dense with coded intelligence. Tiny, seemingly decorative symbols scattered across the parchment held critical meaning. A small, stylized ship drawn next to a coastal village might not indicate its existence, but rather that the harbor there was deep enough for their galleys and that the local official was open to negotiation for safe harbor fees. A cluster of 3 dots near a mountain pass could signal a reliable source of fresh water or a hidden cave large enough to store supplies. These annotations turned a simple navigational aid into a dynamic database of logistical and strategic information, all accessible through their shared geographic code. This system proved invaluable for navigating the complex and often treacherous political landscapes of the medieval world. Consider a Templar knight traveling from Acre to Antioch, a journey through territory constantly shifting between various Christian lords, Muslim emirs, and independent bandits. He wouldn't just carry a map showing the roads, he would carry one annotated with the geographic codes of the current political climate. A region marked with a green border might indicate a friendly ruler who honored their letters of credit, while an area shaded with subtle red cross hatching could warn of recent raids or a hostile local leader. This allowed the knight to adjust his route in real time, avoiding danger and utilizing safe houses and resupply points known only to the order. It was a system that provided not just directions, but a continuous stream of contextual intelligence. The practicality of this geographic approach extended to managing their vast and sprawling estates. The order owned thousands of properties across Europe and the Near East farms, mills, vineyards, and entire villages. Keeping track of the income, resources, and obligations from each was a monumental task. Their solution was to tie every asset to its location on a master grid. A financial report from a preceptory in England would be geographically coded, allowing a treasurer in Paris to instantly cross-reference it with a map showing the estate's boundaries, a ledger detailing its tenant farmers, and a weather log from that region for the past decade. If a harvest failed in Lombardy, they could quickly locate their other grain-producing estates in Provence and adjust shipments accordingly. This geographic indexing turned their chaotic web of holdings into a manageable and responsive economic network. Perhaps the greatest strength of geographic coding was its inherent durability and decentralization. If the central archive in Paris was raided and its documents burned, the knowledge wasn't necessarily lost forever. Because the information was tied to physical places, copies or related documents stored elsewhere remained meaningful. A commandery in Portugal would still have its locally relevant maps and ledgers, all tagged with the same geographic codes. A brother escaping a fallen fortress could carry a small, coded map sewn into his tunic, and that single document could hold the keys to re-establishing contact with hidden supply caches, friendly agents, or other surviving members based on the locations it referenced. The knowledge was distributed across the landscape itself, making it virtually impossible to erase completely. By weaving their information into the very geography they operated within, the Templars ensured their operational knowledge would endure long after any single library or fortress was gone. Beyond the spatial intelligence of maps and the silent language of symbols, the Templars developed a third, equally vital system for structuring their world: chronological indexing. They possessed a profound understanding that time itself is a framework for meaning, and by meticulously organizing their knowledge along temporal lines, they could detect patterns, honor obligations, and even attempt to peer into the future. This wasn't merely about recording dates, it was about weaving individual events into a grand, predictive tapestry of cause and effect. Their concept of time was far richer and more layered than a simple linear progression of days and years. While they used the standard Julian calendar for everyday affairs, their chronological system was deeply interwoven with the sacred rhythms of their faith. The liturgical calendar, marked by seasons like Advent and Lent, and feasts like Easter and Christmas, provided a recurring spiritual framework. A loan agreement might not just be dated to a specific month, but to the second week of Pentecost, instantly connecting that financial transaction to a specific period in the annual cycle of worship and community. This created a mnemonic link, making dates easier to recall and obligations harder to forget, as they were tied to universally observed holy days. But their temporal vision extended beyond the church walls, reaching up to the heavens themselves. They paid close attention to astronomical events, meticulously recording the phases of the moon, the positions of planets, and the appearance of comets. This served multiple practical purposes. The lunar cycle, for instance, was crucial for calculating the movable date of Easter each year, a cornerstone of their liturgical planning. More profoundly, celestial events were often seen as portents. A record of a debt owed to the Crown of France might be annotated with a note about a solar eclipse that occurred on the day the agreement was signed. This wasn't mere superstition. It was a way of embedding that singular event within a broader cosmic narrative, potentially marking it as particularly significant or foretelling a future challenge in collecting that debt. We can see this sophisticated system in action within their famous financial ledgers. A typical entry was far more than a line item. It might read something like, "On the feast of Saint Michael, in the year of our Lord 1274, with Mars in conjunction with Jupiter, a loan of 5,000 gold livres was extended to Lord Edward of England for the outfitting of 10 ships, repayment due on the feast of St. John the Baptist following the next harvest." This single entry ties the transaction to a religious feast day, a specific astronomical event, the recipient, the purpose, and a repayment schedule based on an agricultural cycle. This dense layering of temporal markers transformed a simple IOU into a rich data point, allowing a treasurer to not only track the debt, but also to anticipate its repayment based on seasonal grain prices, and even to reflect on the potential political implications of funding a king's naval ambitions during a specific astrological alignment. This chronological framework was also indispensable for their logistical operations, which spanned continents. Coordinating the shipment of supplies from a farm in Normandy to a fortress in the Holy Land was a nightmare of timing. By indexing their shipping manifests and warehouse inventories with precise and consistent dating, often synchronized to a master calendar kept at their Paris headquarters, they could create a coherent picture of their entire supply chain. They could see that the wool shipped from England in spring should arrive in Sicily by early summer, just in time to be loaded onto a galley, making its annual run to Acre before the autumn storms made travel too dangerous. This allowed them to plan months, even years, in advance, turning the chaotic flow of medieval travel, and trade into a predictable and manageable system. The ultimate power of this method lay in its ability to generate actionable intelligence from raw history. By maintaining detailed chronicles of events, battles won and lost, kings crowned and deposed, droughts, plagues, and economic booms, all indexed with the same meticulous dating, they could analyze trends. They might notice that conflicts with a certain Muslim dynasty always seemed to intensify in years following a poor harvest in Egypt, suggesting a link between food scarcity and military aggression. Or they could track the repayment histories of various noble families, identifying which ones were reliable and which were perpetually late, allowing them to adjust their terms and interest rates accordingly. Their chronological indexes allowed them to rewind and replay the past, not for nostalgia, but to forecast the future and make smarter, more strategic decisions in the present. It was this ability to see time as a strategic landscape full of patterns and portents that gave the Templars one of their greatest advantages, the power of foresight. Beyond the silent language of symbols and the structured grids of time and place, the Templars wielded a fourth and perhaps most cunning weapon in their information arsenal, the very power of words themselves. They were masters of linguistic encryption, turning the diversity of languages they encountered into a sophisticated tool for obfuscation and security. Operating at the crossroads of cultures, the order was inherently multilingual. The official language of the Church and their own rule was Latin, the tongue of scholarship and authority across Christendom. But their knights and sergeants came from all over Europe, speaking vernacular dialects like Old French, Occitan, English, and German. Furthermore, their prolonged presence in the Levant brought them into daily contact with Greek-speaking Byzantine officials and Arabic-speaking Muslim scholars, merchants, and adversaries. This polyglot environment wasn't a barrier, it was a resource they learned to exploit with brilliant subtlety. Their most straightforward technique was language switching within a single document, a practice designed to deliberately disorient and confuse any unauthorized reader. Imagine a Templar clerk drafting a report on the political loyalties of a local emir. He might begin the document in perfectly formal Latin, detailing the weather or agricultural conditions, information that was benign and could be safely read by any visiting church official. Then, without any warning or change in handwriting, the text would seamlessly switch into Old French or even Arabic script to record the truly sensitive intelligence, the emir's secret negotiations with a rival faction or the location of his hidden treasury. To an outsider, the document would appear to be a chaotic, nonsensical jumble, perhaps the work of an uneducated scribe. But to an initiated brother, fluent in all the Order's operational languages, the shift was a clear signal, a bold line separating public facade from private truth. It was a literary trapdoor hiding the most valuable secrets in a pit of confusing verbiage. But they didn't stop there. Within these language shifts, they embedded another layer of secrecy, ciphers and codes. A common method was the use of substitution ciphers, where letters were consistently replaced with other letters or symbols according to a prearranged key. For instance, a surviving fragment from the Templar trial documents shows a system where the letters of the alphabet were simply reversed. A became Z, B became Y, and so on. While simple by modern cryptographic standards, this would have been more than enough to baffle a medieval agent or a curious local lord. They also employed acronyms and abbreviations known only within the Order. A phrase like "the shipment from Lyon is secure" might be condensed in the margins to a coded acronym like TSFLIS, which, to the uninitiated, could look like a random scribble or a liturgical reference, but to a Templar quartermaster, it conveyed a complete and urgent message. We can find glimpses of these techniques in the few precious fragments of their records that survived the Purge. One fascinating example is a financial ledger from a commandery in Cyprus. On the surface, it appears to be a standard list of expenses written in Latin: for the repair of the mill, for the purchase of 20 bolts of cloth, and so on. But interspersed within these mundane entries are words suddenly written in Greek characters, though the word itself is a French term for a type of coin. Elsewhere, a notation for a large quantity of grain is followed by a line of text in a rudimentary Arabic cipher that, when decoded, doesn't relate to grain at all, but instead gives the name of a ship and its suspected departure date for Egypt. The true transaction, a covert shipment of supplies possibly meant to leverage a trade negotiation, is hidden beneath 3 layers of linguistic misdirection: a language shift, a cipher, and a false context. This multi-layered approach to language provided a formidable defense. It protected their communications during transit. A message carried by a courier could be intercepted, but its true meaning remained locked away behind a wall of polyglot confusion. It safeguarded their archives. Even if an enemy force stormed a commandery and seized its chests of documents, they would be faced with the monumental task of not only translating multiple languages, but also recognizing which parts were encoded and then breaking those codes. This linguistic armor made their information resilient to casual theft and incredibly resistant to deliberate espionage. By refusing to be confined to a single tongue, the Templars turned the entire Babel of the medieval world into their own private, impenetrable vault of secrets. Yet for all their brilliance with parchment and ink, the Templars understood the ultimate fragility of the written word. A fire could consume a ledger, an invading army could seize a chest of maps, and a coded symbol could fade into obscurity if its meaning was not preserved. To counter this, they cultivated a powerful and parallel system of knowledge preservation that required no physical form at all, a robust and meticulously maintained oral tradition. This wasn't just casual storytelling around a fire. It was a formal, disciplined practice of memorization and verbal transmission that acted as a living, breathing backup for their entire archive. The most sensitive secrets, the identities of their most powerful financial patrons, the true meanings behind their most obscure symbols, the locations of caches never to be marked on any map, were often deemed too dangerous to ever commit to writing. This knowledge was reserved for the ears and minds of trusted, initiated members only, passed from master to apprentice in strict confidence through years of training. To manage this immense task of memory, they became masters of the mnemonic arts, employing sophisticated techniques to encode vast amounts of complex data into easily memorable formats. Imagine a young initiate being taught a seemingly simple song about the virtues of a knight: humility, piety, courage, but the melody itself, the number of verses, and the specific order of the virtues acted as a cunning cipher. The tune might correspond to a specific geographic coordinate. The 8 virtues might represent the 8 digits of a hidden vault's combination, and the 5th line of the 3rd verse might contain a coded reference to a contact in a foreign port city. What sounded like a devotional hymn was in reality a densely packed data file sung into memory. Rituals and ceremonies served a similar purpose. The precise steps of an initiation rite, the specific tools laid upon an altar in a particular sequence, even the colors of the robes worn. Each element could be a trigger for recalling a complex financial formula, a strategic principle, or a list of safe passage routes. Historical accounts, particularly from the period of their trials, hint at this formidable capacity for memorization. Under interrogation, some Templars demonstrated an astonishing ability to recite, verbatim, long passages from their rule, complex lists of assets from commanderies they had never visited, and detailed descriptions of rituals they claimed were purely symbolic. This wasn't just rote learning, it was evidence of a highly trained memory, capable of retaining and accurately reproducing staggering volumes of information on demand. This skill turned every initiated brother into a potential vessel for the Order's most critical intelligence, a walking, talking index who could rebuild essential operations from memory alone if necessary. The true genius of this system lay in its powerful redundancy. The written indexes and the oral traditions were not separate entities. They were deeply intertwined, each reinforcing and explaining the other. A written document might contain a cryptic symbol whose full meaning was only explained orally, ensuring the parchment was useless without the spoken key. Conversely, a complex mnemonic song about navigation might reference a specific map by its geographic code, forcing the initiate to consult the physical archive to complete the puzzle. This created a brilliant security protocol. To access the Order's complete knowledge, one needed both physical possession of the documents and the initiation into the oral keys, a combination that was nearly impossible for an outsider to achieve. This blend of the written and the spoken created a failsafe of incredible resilience. It meant that even in their darkest hour, as their fortresses fell and their archives were seized and burned by King Philip's agents, the Templars' knowledge did not die with their libraries. The living index carried in the minds of the dispersed and fleeing brothers endured. A knight escaping a raided commandery carried nothing but the clothes on his back and the songs, rituals, and mnemonics etched into his memory, and that was enough to preserve the core of their operational wisdom. This oral tradition ensured that their most vital secrets could cross mountains and seas without a single scrap of parchment, could survive imprisonment and interrogation, and could be whispered from one generation to the next, long after the Order itself had been officially dissolved. It was the ultimate act of informational defiance, proving that the most durable archive is not made of stone and vellum, but of human memory and voice. Their decades in the Holy Land placed the Templars at a unique intellectual crossroads, where the scholarly traditions of East and West were not just adjacent, but actively colliding and intertwining. This was not a one-way street of European knights imposing their ways upon a foreign land. It was a dynamic, often reluctant, but ultimately transformative exchange. The Templars, pragmatic to their core, quickly recognized that the Byzantine, Islamic, and Jewish scholars they encountered possessed systems of knowledge and organization that were, in many respects, far more advanced than their own. Rather than rejecting this foreign wisdom, they became its diligent students, absorbing and adapting these Eastern techniques to forge a uniquely sophisticated hybrid system for indexing their own vast archives. One of the most significant influences came from the administrative machinery of the Islamic world, particularly the institution of the Diwan. In the Great Caliphates, the Diwan was the central administrative bureau, a sophisticated government department responsible for maintaining meticulous records of state finances, land grants, military roles, and correspondence. Its clerks developed highly organized archival practices, using standardized forms, cross-referencing systems, and methods for verifying the authenticity of documents. The Templars, managing a similarly sprawling and complex transnational operation, would have seen the immense efficiency of such a system. It's highly plausible that they modeled aspects of their own chancery, the office responsible for their documents on the Diwan, adopting its ethos of rigorous, centralized, and systematic record-keeping. This Eastern influence moved them beyond the ad hoc methods common in feudal Europe and toward a more bureaucratic, and therefore more durable, model of information management. Beyond bureaucracy, the Templars were also exposed to deeper, more esoteric symbolic systems, notably Jewish Kabbalah. Kabbalistic thought is deeply concerned with the power of symbols, letters, and numbers as vessels of hidden divine meaning. It employs complex diagrams like the Tree of Life to map the relationships between different aspects of creation and consciousness. For the Templars, who were already inclined to use symbols as organizational tags and secret codes, encountering Kabbalah must have been a revelation. It offered a philosophical and spiritual framework that elevated their practical symbols into something more profound. We can speculate that their use of geometric patterns, specific numbers, and layered symbolism in their architecture and documents may have been enriched by Kabbalistic concepts, adding a new dimension of hidden meaning that was both spiritual and practical, discernible only to those trained in its interpretation. The most concrete evidence of this cross-cultural exchange lies in the realm of translation and scholarship. The Templars controlled key strategic points, and their castles often became unlikely centers of intellectual commerce. There are accounts of them facilitating, or at least permitting, the work of translation teams where Jewish and Muslim scholars worked alongside Christian clerics. Through these channels, seminal Arabic texts on mathematics, particularly algebra and algorithms, entered their sphere of knowledge. The very word algorithm derives from the name of the Persian mathematician Al-Khwarizmi. Understanding advanced mathematics would have provided them with more complex logical structures for categorization and encryption. Similarly, Arabic advances in astronomy, with its precise charts and predictive tables, would have deeply influenced their own chronological indexing methods, allowing for more accurate long-term calendar keeping and navigation aids. This fusion of Eastern and Western techniques did not result in a messy patchwork. Instead, it created a system of remarkable synergy and strength. The Templars took the administrative rigor of the Islamic Diwan and combined it with the symbolic depth of Kabbalah and the logical precision of Arabic mathematics. They then overlaid this onto their own foundation of Christian monastic discipline and European feudal record-keeping. The result was an indexing methodology that was truly greater than the sum of its parts. It was a system capable of handling the mundane details of a sheep farm in England with the same logical framework used to encrypt a secret treaty with an Armenian prince. Their openness to foreign knowledge, born from the pragmatic necessities of survival in a multicultural world, ultimately granted them an intellectual advantage that no purely European order could match. It was this willingness to learn from their so-called adversaries that made their systems of knowledge preservation uniquely sophisticated and formidably resilient. This sprawling web of commanderies, preceptories, and farms was far more than a collection of outposts. It functioned as one of history's first truly distributed information networks, a manual, human-powered version of what we would now recognize as a cloud-based server system. Each node in this network, from the mighty Paris temple to a humble agricultural grange in the English countryside, was both an information consumer and a vital information producer, constantly generating data and receiving intelligence. The sheer geographic scale was staggering. A message from a fortress in Armenia could influence a financial decision in London, and a harvest report from Portugal could dictate military logistics in Cyprus. Managing this flow of data across thousands of miles with travel times measured in weeks or months was an organizational challenge of monumental proportions, and it was their revolutionary indexing system that made it not just possible but brilliantly efficient. The secret to their synchronization lay in the universal language of their indexes. A standardized set of symbols, geographic codes, and chronological markers meant that a report drafted by a clerk in Jerusalem could be instantly understood and correctly filed by his counterpart in Paris, without the need for lengthy explanatory letters or costly personal briefings. A ledger page filled with financial data, tagged with the geographic symbol for Aquitaine and the chronological mark for the autumn harvest, would be immediately routed to the correct desk for processing and cross-referenced with existing records from that region and season. This shared organizational grammar eliminated confusion and ensured that every commandery, regardless of its location or primary function, was operating from the same informational playbook. It created a consistent and coherent operational reality across continents. This flow of indexed intelligence was the lifeblood of their entire enterprise. Specialized messengers, often lay brothers sworn to the order, formed a dedicated corps of couriers carrying sealed packets of documents along predetermined and protected routes. The contents of these packets were not random. They were carefully curated collections of indexed intelligence. A ship leaving the port of Acre for Marseille might carry a manifest that included a pouch tagged with military symbols for the Paris headquarters, containing coded updates on Mamluk troop movements, another with economic symbols for the London Treasury, holding interest rate calculations for a loan to the English crown, and a third with agricultural symbols for a regional commander. Provost detailing expected crop yields. The indexes on the outside of these pouches acted as routing instructions, ensuring each piece of intelligence found its way to the correct department with minimal delay. The security of this system was paramount. These messengers traveled under the protection of the Order's formidable reputation, but the documents themselves were the real treasure. To protect them from interception or theft, the Templars employed multiple layers of security. The physical documents were often written in their layered linguistic codes, making them useless to any highwayman or rival agent who might waylay a courier. Particularly sensitive information was sometimes broken up and sent via multiple routes. The geographic codes for a hidden treasure cache might be sent overland, while the symbolic key to decipher its exact location was sent by a different ship weeks later. This ensured that even if one packet was lost, the complete information remained secure. The entire network was designed with redundancy and security in mind, much like a modern encrypted digital network routing packets of data through various nodes to avoid compromise. The ultimate power of this system was its ability to generate a swift and cohesive response to any crisis or opportunity. Imagine a rumor reaches a commandery in Sicily that a trade embargo is being planned against Ancona, a key Italian port they used. The local commander immediately dispatches a coded message using the index for urgent economic threat. This message races across the network, reaching the central treasury, which cross-references its indexes to identify all Templar assets and ongoing transactions tied to Ancona. Simultaneously, a separate advisory is sent to ships in the Mediterranean, tagged with navigational codes to avoid the port. Within a matter of weeks, the entire order has pivoted, rerouting trade, securing assets, and adjusting financial strategies, all based on a single piece of intelligence, efficiently tagged, rapidly transmitted, and accurately interpreted by a distributed network stretching from the Middle East to the British Isles. This organizational reach, this ability to act as a single, intelligent organism across vast distances, was their true source of power, granting them a longevity and influence that far outstripped the fortunes of the kingdoms they served. For decades, the Knights Templar had been the untouchable pillars of Christendom, answerable to none but the Pope himself. But by the dawn of the 14th century, the political winds had shifted violently against them. King Philip IV of France, nicknamed Philip the Fair for his looks but not his deeds, found himself drowning in debt, much of it owed to the very order he had borrowed from. His ambition was as vast as his empty treasury, and he saw the Templars not as pious knights but as the one obstacle standing between him and absolute power. He needed a pretext to destroy them and seize their wealth, and so he began a ruthless campaign of whispers and lies, painting the order as a den of heretics, blasphemers, and sodomites. These accusations were grotesque fabrications, but they were weapons carefully chosen for their shock value and their ability to undermine the Templars' sacred reputation. The trap was sprung with terrifying efficiency on Friday, October 13, 1307, a date that would forever live in infamy and seed our modern superstitions. In a perfectly coordinated dawn raid across the entire Kingdom of France, royal officers simultaneously burst into Templar commanderies, arresting every knight, sergeant, and priest they could find. There was no warning, no chance to mount a defense. The Order's Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was seized at the Paris Temple, the very heart of their power. The charges were read aloud, denying Christ, spitting on the cross, worshipping a mysterious idol called Baphomet, and engaging in obscene secret rituals. Under the brutal torture sanctioned by the Inquisition, many brothers, including de Molay himself, confessed to these invented crimes, their bodies broken to serve the king's narrative. It was the beginning of the end, a masterclass in political annihilation. As the king's net tightened, the Templars' most crucial and long-prepared defense mechanism snapped into action, the emergency protocol for their knowledge. For an order that had always lived under the shadow of potential betrayal, the sudden raids, while shocking, were not entirely unforeseen. In those frantic hours and days before the arrests could be carried out everywhere, a silent, desperate scramble began. Using the very indexing systems they had perfected for efficiency, they now used them for survival. Brothers tasked with guarding the archives became librarians of a dying library, making split-second decisions. Documents tagged with the highest-level secrecy symbols were the first priority, pulled from shelves, removed from their hiding places, and bundled for transport. The geographic codes on maps now served as routes to safety, pointing toward remote commanderies, sympathetic noble estates, or hidden caves that had been prepositioned for just such a catastrophe. The stories that emerged from this chaos are fragments of a grand, silent escape. There are tales of Templar sergeants disguising themselves as merchants, their wagons loaded not with goods but with chests of carefully selected, symbol-tagged parchments covered by a thin layer of straw or grain. Other accounts speak of coded messages, written in the symbolic shorthand of their marginalia, being sent along the Order's remaining communication lines. A simple drawing of a specific cross pate next to a geographic symbol for Scotland might have been a silent instruction to smuggle a particular cache of documents to their brethren there. There are even persistent legends of Templar galleys, loaded with their most precious archives, slipping out of the port of La Rochelle under cover of darkness, vanishing into the Atlantic mists, their ultimate destination a mystery that fuels speculation to this day. For those unfortunate brothers who were captured and imprisoned, the indexing language became a lifeline and a tool of resistance. Isolated in their dungeons, they found ways to communicate. A scratched symbol on a food bowl, a particular arrangement of stones in a cell corner, or a snippet of a song hummed during exercise in the yard, all could carry coded messages of encouragement, warn of betrayals, or coordinate their testimony. This shared, silent language, invisible to their jailers, allowed them to maintain a semblance of unity and purpose even in the face of torture and the stake. It was the final, defiant act of their information network, operating under the most oppressive conditions imaginable. The Order's formal dissolution came in 1312, when a weakened Pope Clement V, under immense pressure from King Philip, officially suppressed the Knights Templar through the papal bull Vox in Excelso. Their properties were transferred to rivals like the Knights Hospitaller, and their members were dispersed, executed, or forced into retirement. It was a complete and utter political victory for the French crown. Yet the king's ultimate prize, the legendary entirety of the Templar treasure and knowledge, remained frustratingly out of reach. The central archive in Paris was seized, but much of its most critical content had already vanished. The vast, interconnected web of knowledge had been deliberately fragmented and dispersed, like dandelion seeds scattered to the wind. This foresight, this last-minute execution of their contingency plan, is why we are still talking about them today. The measures they took in those final days ensured that fragments of their system, their maps, their financial techniques, and their symbolic language survived. These fragments did not disappear. They were absorbed into other institutions, studied by secret societies that arose in their wake, and passed down through families and traditions. The Templars themselves were gone, but their indexed knowledge, designed from the very beginning to be resilient, to be decentralized, and to outlast any single empire or king, had fulfilled its ultimate purpose. It had survived its creators, whispering its secrets into the centuries that followed. The disappearance of the Templar archives after the Order's dissolution did not mark the end of their story. It ignited a centuries-long treasure hunt that continues to this day, a quest not just for gold, but for the very keys to their knowledge, the lost indexes themselves. This isn't a pursuit confined to dusty academic journals. It's a global fascination that draws in historians, codebreakers, archaeologists, and amateur sleuths, all captivated by the possibility of unlocking one of history's greatest vaults of secrets. The search has taken many forms, evolving from the deciphering of medieval cryptograms found in forgotten manuscripts to high-tech, non-invasive archaeological surveys of ancient Templar sites. Each potential clue, whether a weathered stone carving or a puzzling line in a ledger, is scrutinized for the hidden syntax that could map the entire system. Some of the most famous and enduring searches have centered on specific locations shrouded in Templar legend. Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, made famous in modern culture, is a prime example. Its interior is a breathtaking forest of stone, every surface covered in intricate carvings of plants, geometric patterns, and enigmatic figures. For generations, researchers have pored over these images, convinced they are more than mere decoration. The theory suggests that the chapel's unique symbolism, from the famed apprentice pillar to the countless carved green men, constitutes a three-dimensional index, a stone-coded library of Templar knowledge, perhaps even pointing the way to whatever was smuggled out of France. While no definitive vault has been found beneath its foundations, the site remains a powerful symbol of the mystery, its very stones seeming to whisper of hidden meanings just beyond our grasp. Similarly, the Iberian Peninsula, particularly Portugal, is a hotbed of Templar speculation. When the order was suppressed across most of Europe, King Diniz of Portugal famously refused to persecute them. Instead, he simply changed their name to the Order of Christ, allowing the knights and their traditions to continue uninterrupted. Their headquarters at the Convent of Christ in Toma is a sprawling architectural marvel, and many believe it became the new sanctuary for their most precious archives. Rumors persist of hidden vaults sealed within its multi-layered construction, waiting for the right combination of symbols to be understood before revealing their contents. The sheer continuity of the order in Portugal makes it one of the most promising and least disturbed locations for potentially discovering intact indexed materials. The motivation for this relentless search is profound, because deciphering even a single complete index could radically reshape our understanding of history. The financial insights alone would be staggering. A master ledger properly decoded could reveal the true extent of their wealth, the full network of loans to European royalty, and perhaps even evidence of discoveries or trade routes in the New World long before Columbus. Historically, it could provide an unfiltered, first-hand account of the Crusades, the inner workings of the papal court, and the political machinations of the 13th and 14th centuries from a unique, behind-the-scenes perspective. And for many, the greatest allure is spiritual, the possibility of accessing esoteric knowledge they may have gathered from various traditions, which could shed light on ancient mysteries or alternative spiritual paths that were suppressed by the Orthodox Church of the time. Thankfully, the modern searcher is not limited to a hammer and chisel. Today's technology provides tools the Templars themselves could never have imagined, offering new ways to peer into the past without causing destruction. Multispectral imaging is one of the most revolutionary. This technique involves photographing a manuscript or artifact using light from across the electromagnetic spectrum, from ultraviolet to infrared. What appears to be a blank piece of parchment to the naked eye might, under infrared light, reveal lines of text that have faded over the centuries, perhaps a hidden index or a palimpsest where a later text was written over an earlier, scraped-clean Templar document. Similarly, ground-penetrating radar allows archaeologists to scan the earth beneath Templar sites like Toma or Temple Church in London, mapping out anomalies and potential hidden chambers without ever breaking ground. These technologies are like giving historians a master key, allowing them to gently probe the secrets that physical objects have held for hundreds of years, bringing us closer than ever to hearing the faint echo of the Templars' organizational genius. Looking at the intricate system of symbols, cross-references, and distributed archives the Templars built, it's almost impossible not to see the ghostly blueprint of our own digital world. Their struggles and solutions, though separated by 800 years, speak directly to the core challenges we face today in managing the overwhelming flood of information. In many ways, they were the medieval pioneers of concepts we now take for granted, building a manual, analog version of the Internet age long before the first computer was ever conceived. Consider the humble act of tagging a digital file on your computer. You might add keywords like vacation, family, or important to a photo. This metadata data about the data is what allows your computer's search function to instantly find that picture among thousands of others. The Templars were doing the exact same thing with parchment and ink. A small cross-pate symbol in the margin of a financial ledger wasn't just decoration, it was metadata. It silently tagged that document as high priority, military-related, or for the eyes of the treasurer only. Their entire symbolic language functioned as a sophisticated system of metadata, creating a web of relationships between documents that allowed for incredibly efficient retrieval, much like the invisible tags that power modern databases and search engines. This use of visual shorthand goes even further, prefiguring the very way we interact with our devices today. The intuitive icons on your phone's home screen, a tiny envelope for mail, a camera for photos, a gear for settings, are the direct descendants of Templar symbolic indexing. They understood that a single, universally understood image could communicate complex information instantly and transcend language barriers. Their geographic symbols on maps, which might have indicated a safe harbor or hostile territory, operated on the same principle as the emojis we use in text today. A skull and crossbones on a Templar map warned of danger just as clearly as a pirate flag emoji might signal a risky idea in a chat. They were leveraging the power of visual communication to create a user interface for their vast archive, one that was intuitive for initiates and impenetrable to outsiders. Perhaps the most striking parallel is in the realm of security. The Templars' use of linguistic encryption, substitution ciphers, and polyglot documents was a form of manual data encryption. They were actively encoding their sensitive information to protect it from interception, just as we use complex algorithms to scramble our emails and financial transactions. Their practice of breaking a sensitive message into parts and sending it via multiple routes is a direct analog to modern packet switching networks, where data is broken into pieces, sent separately across the internet, and reassembled at its destination, making it incredibly difficult for any single intercept to capture the complete message. Their entire approach to secrecy was not just about hiding information, but about designing it to be useless and unreadable if it fell into the wrong hands, the very essence of modern cybersecurity. Furthermore, their sprawling network of commanderies functioned as a physical, human-powered precursor to both cloud storage and blockchain technology. Their archives weren't centralized in one vulnerable location. They were distributed across dozens of fortresses from London to Jerusalem. This is the exact same principle as cloud storage, where your data isn't stored on a single server, but is redundantly copied across multiple data centers around the globe. If one center fails, your information remains safe and accessible elsewhere. The Templars were creating geographic redundancy for their knowledge. Similarly, the way they maintained synchronized, authenticated copies of important records like financial ledgers across different commanderies echoes the distributed ledger technology of blockchain. If a local commander tried to falsify a record, the central archive and other commanderies would hold the true, verified version, creating a system of checks and balances that ensured integrity and trust across a decentralized network. These parallels are not just charming historical curiosities. They are profound reminders that the fundamental human challenges of organizing, securing, and retrieving knowledge are timeless. The mediums change from parchment to silicon, from horseback messengers to fiber optic cables, but the core problems persist. How do we find what we need quickly? How do we protect our most valuable secrets? How do we ensure our information survives disaster? The Templars, with their limited technology but boundless ingenuity, developed a suite of answers that continue to resonate. Their legacy is a powerful testament to the fact that the drive to bring order to chaos, to make sense of our world through information, is a deeply human impulse, one that connects a medieval knight safeguarding a ledger to a modern programmer writing a new algorithm. Of course, the most tantalizing and enduring legends surrounding the Templars are not about their ledgers or their logistics, but about the mythical treasures they supposedly guarded, objects of immense power and world-altering secrets. The popular imagination, fueled by countless novels and films, paints a picture of the Order as the ultimate keepers of the esoteric, the guardians of the Holy Grail itself, the holders of the Ark of the Covenant, or the possessors of earth-shattering prophecies about the end of days. These stories are incredibly compelling, a potent blend of history, mystery, and pure fantasy that has captured our collective consciousness for centuries. But when we peel back the layers of fiction and look at the documented historical record, a different, though no less remarkable, picture emerges. The truth of their indexing systems is not found in magical relics, but in a breathtakingly advanced and pragmatic approach to information science that was centuries ahead of its time. The leap from their documented role as bankers and innovators to the legendary guardians of the Grail is a fascinating study in how myths are born. The connection likely stems from their name, being headquartered on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The supposed site of Solomon's temple naturally linked them in the medieval mind to ancient biblical treasures. Furthermore, their immense, unexplained wealth and their sudden dissolution created a vacuum of knowledge. people in the 14th century, just like us today, struggled to explain such a rapid and complete downfall of a powerful institution. The simplest explanation that a greedy king fabricated charges to seize their assets somehow felt insufficient for an order shrouded in so much mystery. A more satisfying narrative emerged that the Templars were destroyed not for their money, but to silence them or to steal a power far greater than gold, a secret so profound it had to be erased from history. This narrative vacuum was eagerly filled with speculation about holy relics and forbidden knowledge. However, when we scrutinize the actual evidence from their own trial records and the surviving fragments of their archives, we find absolutely no mention of the Holy Grail, the Ark, or any other such religious artifact. The charges brought against them by King Philip were entirely focused on fabricated claims of heresy and blasphemy, spitting on the cross, denying Christ, and engaging in homosexual practices. Notably, the king's prosecutors, who were desperate to find any and all damning evidence, never once alleged they possessed these legendary objects. If there had been even a whisper of a rumor about the Grail in the early 14th century, you can be certain Philip would have used it as the centerpiece of his accusations. Its absence from the historical trial documents is perhaps the most compelling evidence that the Grail legend was attached to the Templars long after their demise, a romantic invention of later generations seeking to attach a grand spiritual purpose to their tragic end. This is not to say the Templars were not secretive or that they didn't possess remarkable knowledge. They absolutely did. But the nature of their secrecy has been wildly exaggerated and misunderstood. Popular culture often depicts them as a kind of medieval Illuminati, hoarding world-changing secrets for their own power. In reality, their secrecy was primarily operational and financial, a necessary defense mechanism. Their indexes were not designed to hide the location of the Grail. They were designed to protect the sensitive financial information of Europe's elite, to secure military intelligence from enemy agents, and to safeguard the intricate details of their international banking network. The true secret they guarded was the names of the kings and nobles who were deeply in debt to them, the details of papal transactions, and the routes of their treasure galleys. This was information that, if exposed, could destabilize kingdoms and shatter the Order's reputation for trustworthiness. Their secrecy was less about mysticism and more about professional discretion on a geopolitical scale. We can see this clearly in the few surviving financial records. A document might use a simple substitution cipher not to encode a prayer to Baphomet, but to record that Lord X has borrowed a sum of Y to be repaid after the harvest from his estates in Z. The geographic codes on a map weren't pointing to the Garden of Eden. They were marking a safe harbor for a ship carrying silver bullion or a remote preceptory that could serve as a secure meeting place. The symbolic tags in their ledgers were not magical sigils. They were pragmatic metadata indicating a document's audit status, its security level, or the department responsible for its action. This reality is, in many ways, more impressive than the fiction. It reveals an organization that had perfected the art of information security not through magic, but through meticulous design and ruthless efficiency. They weren't sorcerers, they were the supreme bureaucrats of the medieval world, and their mastery of that bureaucracy was their real magic. Understanding this distinction is crucial because it allows us to appreciate their genuine, documented achievements without the filter of fantasy. The truth that a group of medieval knights developed a system of data management that rivals modern concepts is a far more fascinating and human story than any tale of hidden relics. It speaks to universal human ingenuity, to the timeless struggle to organize, protect, and understand our world through information. By letting go of the exaggerated myths, we can finally see the Templars for what they truly were, not guardians of a lost chalice, but the architects of a lost revolution in knowledge, whose real treasure was not gold, but the system they built to manage it. Their legacy is not a map to a hidden tomb, but a blueprint for making knowledge last forever. For a military order founded on vows of piety and obedience, the spiritual realm was not separate from their daily operations. It was the very bedrock upon which everything else was built. Their sophisticated indexing systems, so effective for finance and strategy, were also meticulously applied to the domain of faith, creating a comprehensive architecture for organizing and accessing religious and spiritual knowledge. This was not a dry, administrative exercise. It was a profound expression of their belief that divine order could be mirrored in human systems, allowing them to maintain a unified spiritual front across a vast and culturally fragmented empire. Their theological indexing ensured that a brother praying in a remote Scottish chapel and a knight attending Mass in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem were participating in the same sacred rhythm, connected by an invisible web of categorized devotion. At the heart of this system was the liturgical calendar, the cyclical map of the Christian year that charts the journey from Christ's birth to his resurrection and beyond. For the Templars, this was far more than a schedule of services. It was the master chronological index for their entire spiritual existence. Every day, every week, every season was tagged with its specific theological significance: Advent, Lent, Easter, Pentecost, and each of these periods dictated a specific set of prayers, readings, and rituals. A Templar priest in charge of a commandery's spiritual life didn't need to decide what Mass to say each day. He would consult the calendar, a meticulously indexed document that pointed him to the correct passages in his missal, the appropriate hymns, and even the specific vestments to be worn. This created an unbreakable continuity, ensuring that the entire order, from Portugal to Palestine, was spiritually synchronized, observing the same fasts and feasts at the exact same time, reinforcing their collective identity as a single body in Christ. This indexing extended into the very space of their worship. Step inside a Templar chapel, like the famous rotunda of London's Temple Church, and you are standing inside a three-dimensional theological index. The architecture itself was a form of categorization, the common practice of building churches in a circular pattern, echoing the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, was a powerful geographic and spiritual tag, instantly connecting the local place of worship to the central event of their faith, the resurrection. But the indexing became even more detailed. The stones spoke a silent language of symbolism. Carvings of specific saints served as visual metadata. A statue of St. George slaying the dragon wasn't just decoration. It was a tag for themes of military courage and spiritual victory over evil. A depiction of St. John the Baptist might be positioned near the baptismal font, creating a physical, thematic link that reinforced the sacrament's meaning. The windows, too, were part of the system. Stained glass scenes were not randomly chosen. They were a curated visual library of scripture and hagiography. The light streaming through a window depicting the Nativity during a Christmas service or the Passion during Holy Week acted as a magnificent, immersive cross-reference, tying the lesson of the day to a vivid visual narrative. Even the alignment of the building was indexed. Churches were traditionally built with the altar at the east end, facing Jerusalem. This orientation was a constant, physical reminder of their origin and ultimate purpose, a geographic tag baked into the foundation that every brother understood intuitively. To move through a Templar chapel was to navigate a carefully organized database of faith, where every architectural element pointed to a deeper theological concept. Their rituals and daily routines were also governed by this precise organization. The Templar Rule, their foundational document, is a masterpiece of behavioral indexing. It doesn't just lay out general principles, it categorizes and prescribes conduct for virtually every aspect of a brother's life, from how many horses he can have to the exact order of prayers during the divine office. Meals were taken in silence while a brother read aloud from a religious text, a practice that indexed nourishment of the body directly with nourishment of the soul. The complex rituals for admitting new members, for confessing sins, or for burying the dead were all carefully scripted and cross-referenced with relevant scriptural justifications. This eliminated ambiguity and personal interpretation, ensuring a standardized, orthodox practice that could be replicated identically in any of their hundreds of commanderies, preventing doctrinal drift and maintaining a cohesive spiritual discipline that transcended local customs and languages. This deep integration of faith and organization reveals the truly holistic nature of the Templar worldview. They did not compartmentalize their lives into secular and sacred boxes. For them, a financial transaction was a matter of stewardship, a military campaign was an act of defending the faith, and organizing information was a way of imitating the divine order they believed governed the universe. Their theological indexing was the ultimate expression of this unity. It allowed them to manage the spiritual life of a transnational organization with the same efficiency they applied to its finances, creating a resilient and durable system of faith that could withstand the pressures of distance, politics, and time. It ensured that their identity remained firmly rooted in their religious purpose, proving that for the Knights Templar, the most important knowledge to index, preserve, and protect was the roadmap to their own salvation. Their immense wealth was not simply stored away in treasure chests. It was a dynamic, constantly flowing river of capital that needed to be tracked, managed, and leveraged across thousands of miles. To master this economic empire, the Templars engineered a financial indexing system of breathtaking complexity and foresight, turning their ledgers into powerful tools that gave them an unparalleled advantage in the medieval world. At the heart of this system were their meticulously designed financial records, which went far beyond simple lists of debits and credits. Each entry was a dense node of information, carefully tagged and cross-referenced to create a web of connections across time and space. Imagine a loan issued to a nobleman in England for the purpose of funding his crusade. The entry wouldn't just note the amount and the date. It would be indexed with a unique transaction code, perhaps a combination of letters and numbers derived from the borrower's name and the date of issuance. This code would then be the key that linked this single entry to a multitude of related documents. This master code could be cross-referenced with a separate ledger detailing the collateral provided, say, a deed to a parcel of land in Normandy. That land deed would itself be tagged with its own geographic code, linking it to a map showing the estate's boundaries and a productivity report from the local preceptory managing it. Simultaneously, the original loan entry would be linked to a schedule of repayments, which might be indexed to the agricultural calendar, noting that payments were due on the feast of Saint Michael following the harvest, tying the financial obligation to the actual flow of goods and income. This meant that a treasurer in Paris could, within minutes, pull every single thread related to this one transaction. He could see the borrower's entire history, the status of his collateral, the expected timeline of repayments, and even how a drought in Normandy might impact the nobleman's ability to pay. This wasn't bookkeeping, it was financial intelligence on a strategic scale, allowing them to assess risk, manage cash flow, and make decisions with a holistic view no one else possessed. This sophisticated indexing was the engine behind their most famous innovation, the letter of credit, a revolutionary tool that made them the bankers of kings and pilgrims alike. A pilgrim from London wanting to journey to Jerusalem faced the terrifying prospect of carrying a fortune in coin through bandit-infested lands. Instead, he could deposit his money at the London Temple and receive a coded letter. This document was a masterpiece of indexed information. It contained details of the deposit, but these were written in a combination of Latin for the basic amount and cipher or symbolic tags for the security verification details. The pilgrim could then travel to the Holy Land, present the letter at the temple in Jerusalem, and withdraw his funds in local currency. The system's security relied entirely on the indexes. The clerk in Jerusalem would verify the letter's authenticity by checking its unique symbols and codes against a master list that was regularly updated and distributed across the network. This prevented forgery and ensured the entire operation ran on trust backed by impeccable organization. They had effectively invented a system of international travelers' checks and wire transfers centuries before the concept of a global bank existed. There is also compelling evidence to suggest the Templars were moving toward a form of double-entry bookkeeping long before it was formally developed in Renaissance Italy. While not the fully realized system perfected by Luca Pacioli, their ledgers show a clear inclination toward balanced accounts. They would often list transactions in a way that showed both the source and the destination of funds. A record of income from a French estate would be entered on one page, and a corresponding entry on another page would show a portion of those funds being allocated to the upkeep of a specific ship in their Mediterranean fleet. This required a precise indexing system to keep these mirrored entries connected across different sections of a ledger or even across different books entirely. This practice of creating a clear audit trail where every credit had a corresponding debit allowed them to maintain an accurate and verifiable picture of their immense and sprawling financial empire, making fraud almost impossible and ensuring the entire operation was transparent to their own internal auditors. This mastery of economic indexing is what truly cemented their power and made them indispensable to the crowns of Europe. They weren't just lenders, they were the central bankers for nations. King Philip IV of France used the Paris Temple as his royal treasury. The Templars didn't just guard his money, they managed it. Their indexed ledgers tracked every tax collected, every loan extended to a baron, every payment to a mercenary army. They could provide the king with a real-time snapshot of his financial health, a capability no royal chancellor could match with his own disorganized records. This gave the Templars unprecedented influence. They knew the financial secrets of every powerful family in Europe who was solvent and who was drowning in debt. This information, meticulously indexed and readily retrievable, was a form of power more potent than any army. It was this very power that ultimately made King Philip so desperate to destroy them and seize their system. In the end, the Templars' financial prowess, built upon the bedrock of their revolutionary indexing, was not just a side business, it was the core of their identity, making them the most advanced economic institution the world had seen since the fall of Rome. Operating in the constant turmoil of the Holy Land, the Templars understood that victory on the battlefield depended as much on information as it did on the strength of their sword arms. Their military might was not just a force of trained knights, it was an intelligence agency in chainmail, and their strategic indexing system was its central nervous system. This was a continuous, dynamic process of gathering, categorizing, and retrieving critical data on everything that could influence the outcome of a conflict. They meticulously catalogued intelligence on enemy commanders, noting their personalities, past tactics, and even rumored rivalries within their ranks. Detailed dossiers were maintained on fortifications, recording not just the height of walls but the composition of the garrison, the state of their supplies, and the mood of the local population. Weather patterns, seasonal changes in river depths, the loyalty of local guides, no detail was too small to be tagged, filed, and made instantly accessible. This transformed their commanderies from mere barracks into living libraries of war, where a commander could formulate a plan based on a deep, data-driven understanding of his opponent and the environment. The most vital tool in this arsenal was their collection of annotated maps, which were nothing like the simple, often fanciful charts of the era. A Templar military map was a dense, layered intelligence briefing rendered on parchment. To an untrained eye, it might show coastlines, mountains, and towns, but scattered across its surface was a secret language of tiny, coded symbols that conveyed a wealth of tactical information. A small, stylized water droplet drawn next to a river crossing didn't just mark its location, it could indicate the depth of the ford during the dry season. A cluster of 3 dots near a mountain path might signal a reliable source of fresh water or a hidden cave large enough to shelter a squadron of knights. Most crucially, these maps used a system of colors and shapes to denote security. A route marked with a green border indicated a path regularly patrolled and deemed safe for travel and supply convoys. A red, jagged line, however, could warn of frequent ambushes, hostile tribal territories, or areas known to be under enemy surveillance. This allowed a Templar commander to assess a landscape not just geographically, but tactically, understanding its opportunities and dangers at a single glance. The true power of this system was its speed and how it translated into a decisive operational advantage. In a world where communication moved at the speed of a galloping horse, the ability to retrieve and act on information faster than your enemy was a weapon in itself. Consider a scenario where a Templar patrol near the city of Acre captures a Muslim scout. Under interrogation, the scout reveals that a Mamluk force is planning to raid a vulnerable Christian village in 3 days' time. A messenger races back to the nearest Templar commandery with this news. The local commander doesn't waste a moment. He goes directly to the archive, retrieves the map indexed with the geographic code for that village, and within minutes he has a complete picture. The map shows not only the village but also the best defensive terrain nearby, the location of a hidden spring for his troops, and 2 potential routes the enemy might take. Cross-referencing this with another ledger tagged for local allies, he identifies a friendly Bedouin tribe in the area who could provide scouts to harass the Mamluk advance. He dispatches orders, and within hours, a Templar contingent is on the move, perfectly positioned to intercept the attack. The Mamluks, expecting to surprise a defenseless village, instead find themselves ambushed by a prepared and strategically positioned Templar force. The battle was won before a single arrow was loosed, decided in the quiet of the archive. This organizational prowess extended beyond the battlefield into the delicate arena of diplomacy and negotiation. The Templars were often called upon to act as intermediaries between various Christian factions, the quarrelless Crusader barons, the Knights Hospitaller, and the merchant states of Italy, as well as with Muslim leaders. In these tense discussions, their indexed knowledge was a source of immense leverage. A Templar negotiator meeting with an emir could draw upon detailed profiles of that leader's past agreements, his financial needs, and the political pressures he faced from rivals within his own court. This allowed the Templar to craft proposals that were not just militarily sound but politically astute, offering terms the emir could actually accept. Their reputation for having this encyclopedic knowledge gave them an aura of omniscience. Opposing negotiators were often hesitant to bluff or misrepresent facts, fearing the Templar would simply produce a dated document or a spy's report that contradicted them. This command of information allowed them to secure favorable truces, guarantee safe passage for merchants, and forge temporary alliances that were crucial for the fragile survival of the Crusader states. Perhaps the most famous example of their strategic indexing proving decisive was their role in the successful siege of the port city of Acre during the Third Crusade. The siege was a chaotic, 2-year-long affair involving a multitude of armies from across Europe, each with its own commanders and agendas. The Templars, with their deep local knowledge and unparalleled organizational system, became the de facto logistics and intelligence coordinators for the entire Christian force. Their geographically indexed maps provided the Crusaders with detailed information on the city's fortifications, pinpointing weaker sections of the walls that had been damaged in previous conflicts. Their network of agents supplied constant updates on the morale and supplies of the Arab garrison inside. Most importantly, their financial indexes allowed them to manage the colossal cost of the siege, tracking shipments of supplies, weapons, and funds from across Europe, and ensuring they were allocated efficiently to where they were needed most. While King Richard the Lionheart provided the charismatic leadership and military brilliance, it was the Templars' silent, systematic management of information and resources that provided the stable foundation upon which the victory was built, ultimately leading to the city's capture and cementing their reputation as the most sophisticated military organization of the medieval world. Their fortresses and chapels were far more than just functional shelters or places of worship. They were the ultimate expression of their indexing genius, transformed into stone and glass. The Templars conceived of architecture itself as a durable, three-dimensional ledger, a permanent and highly visible yet discreet archive designed to withstand the ravages of time and conflict in a way parchment never could. They embedded their complex system of symbols and references directly into the fabric of their buildings, turning keystones, floor tiles, stained glass windows, and even the very layout of their spaces into a silent, permanent language. To walk through a Templar structure was to navigate a physical database, where every carved capital and aligned archway could be cross-referenced for meaning, creating a sanctuary of knowledge that was both immovable and incredibly resilient. Consider the profound symbolism encoded in the very floor a knight walked upon. In many of their churches, the floor tiles were laid in intricate geometric patterns, often featuring interlocking circles and squares. To the casual observer, this was simply beautiful decoration, but for the initiated, these patterns were a symbolic index of profound theological and philosophical concepts. The square represented the earthly, the four elements, and the material world. The circles symbolized the divine, eternity, and the heavens. Their interlocking design was a constant, underfoot reminder of the Templar ideal, the perfect union of the earthly knight and the divine purpose, the sacred duty to bring heavenly order to the chaotic material world. A specific pattern might even serve as a subtle wayfinder. A path of tiles with a unique design could lead the eye and the feet toward a particular chapel or altar that held special significance, acting as a physical hyperlink encoded in clay and glaze. This symbolic language soared upward from the floors to the very heights of their chapels. Stained glass windows, magnificent and luminous, were far more than biblical comic strips for an illiterate congregation. They were carefully curated visual indexes, each scene and character chosen to represent specific theological themes or historical events crucial to the order. The specific colors held meaning: deep blues for divine truth and the heavens, red for martyrdom and sacrifice, green for renewal and the earthly kingdom. A window depicting the presentation of Christ in the temple wasn't just telling a story. it was tagging that entire section of the church with themes of dedication, prophecy, and recognition of the divine. The light itself became part of the system, as the sun's movement throughout the day would illuminate different windows, dynamically highlighting different indexed themes during different services, creating a living, breathing cycle of visual cross-references that changed with the hours and the seasons. Perhaps the most compelling examples of this architectural indexing survive in places like the Convent of Christ in Tama, Portugal. This sprawling complex, which became the headquarters of the Order of Christ, the direct successor to the Templars in that country, is a masterpiece of stone-coded symbolism. The famous charola, the original Templar oratory, is a stunning 16-sided structure, a direct architectural reference to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. This design wasn't just about homage, it was a massive geographic index, instantly transporting the worshipper inside it to the spiritual center of their faith, no matter how far they were from the Holy Land. The exterior of the church is adorned with a breathtaking array of Manuline motifs twisting ropes, armillary spheres, and exotic vegetation. While added later, these elements continue the Templar tradition of indexing knowledge. The ropes symbolize the age of discovery and the Templars' role in navigation, while the armillary spheres are complex indexes of celestial knowledge, reflecting their understanding of astronomy. Every inch of the stonework seems to whisper of encoded secrets, from the history of Portuguese exploration to the deeper mystical traditions the order may have preserved. Similarly, Temple Church in London offers a powerful example of this principle. Its distinctive round nave is itself a massive symbolic tag, referencing the circular Church of the Holy Sepulchre and instantly categorizing the building as a Templar foundation. Inside, the effigies of knights lying on the floor are not randomly placed. Their specific positions, their armor, and their heraldry act as a frozen index of membership and hierarchy, a permanent record of important brothers who served the order. The striking marble Purbeck columns and the foliate carvings on the capitals are not merely decorative. Scholars have long debated their potential symbolic meanings, with some suggesting they represent the 9 original founders or encode specific numerological codes significant to the order. The entire structure functions as a durable, 3-dimensional manifest, a building that is quite literally its own filing system. The sheer durability of this architectural indexing was its ultimate brilliance. A parchment could be burned, a ledger could be stolen, but a fortress or a church built to last centuries was a different proposition entirely. By embedding their indexes into the very stones they laid, the Templars ensured that their core principles, their history, and their symbolic language would remain accessible to those who knew how to look, long after the order itself was gone. These structures stood as silent, steadfast sentinels of knowledge, their messages carved in a language of stone and light, waiting patiently for centuries for someone to learn how to read them again. This architectural strategy was the ultimate testament to their commitment, proving that for the Knights Templar, the most important information wasn't just meant to be written down, it was meant to be built to last forever. With the official dissolution of the order in 1312, the meticulously curated knowledge system of the Knights Templar faced its greatest trial. The vast, interconnected web of indexed archives was suddenly severed, its guardians imprisoned, executed, or scattered to the winds. The fate of these priceless records was as varied and complex as the indexes themselves, splintering into 3 distinct paths: absorption by rival powers, deliberate destruction to erase their power, and cunning concealment to ensure their survival. King Philip IV of France, having orchestrated the downfall, immediately seized the central archive at the Paris Temple, expecting to find the legendary treasure that would refill his empty coffers. To his immense frustration, the most sensitive and valuable documents, those tagged with the highest level security symbols, were already gone. What remained were often the more mundane administrative records, which were nonetheless absorbed into the royal bureaucracy. Across Europe, the vast landed estates and physical assets of the Templars were largely transferred by papal decree to their great rivals, the Knights Hospitaller. This transfer included libraries and charters, meaning countless indexed documents concerning land titles, local taxes, and agricultural production were simply inherited, their Templar origins slowly fading into obscurity as they were integrated into the Hospitaller's own, less sophisticated record-keeping systems. Yet for every document absorbed, another was likely destroyed. The burning of Jacques de Molay at the stake in 1314 was a very public symbol of the king's desire to erase the order from history, and this extended to their written legacy. Documents deemed heretical by the Inquisition, whether genuinely so or simply labeled as such for political convenience, were consigned to the flames. In many cases, the destruction was not malicious but pragmatic. New occupants of former Templar properties, whether Hospitallers or local lords, would have had little use for old financial ledgers or encrypted maps they couldn't read. Parchment was a valuable commodity. It could be scraped clean and reused as a palimpsest or cut up for binding other books, effectively recycling the physical material while obliterating the knowledge it contained. This casual destruction represents an incalculable loss, as even a seemingly trivial inventory list, with its unique symbolic tags, could have held a key piece of the larger indexing puzzle. The most tantalizing possibility, however, is that the core of the system, the master indexes, the sensitive intelligence, the spiritual texts, was successfully hidden before the net could close completely. This has given rise to centuries of speculation and pursuit. Persistent rumors speak of a fleet of Templar galleys escaping the French port of La Rochelle, their holds filled not with gold bullion but with chests of archived knowledge bound for unknown shores. Scotland is a frequent candidate for their sanctuary, as the order was never formally suppressed there, and King Robert the Bruce was under papal excommunication, making him unlikely to obey orders from Rome. The connections between certain Scottish noble families and the Templars have fueled theories that documents were hidden beneath Rosslyn Chapel or within the tunnels beneath Edinburgh. Similarly, Switzerland, with its sudden emergence as a haven of banking and secrecy shortly after the Templar dissolution, is often suggested as a recipient of their fugitive financial wisdom, with the indexes to their banking systems being smuggled into the Alpine valleys for safekeeping. Perhaps the most adventurous theory posits an Atlantic voyage, suggesting that some Templars possessing maps indexed with geographic knowledge from their travels fled to the New World long before Columbus. The unusual carvings on the Westford Knight stone in Massachusetts or the Newport Tower in Rhode Island are sometimes pointed to as evidence, though mainstream historians largely dismiss these claims. The idea that Templar indexes could have contained maps of North America is a captivating, if highly speculative, notion. The true influence of the surviving knowledge is more subtly visible in the rise of later fraternal organizations. When the Templar Order vanished, it created a vacuum filled by new groups who claimed to inherit their legacy and secrets. The Freemasons, emerging centuries later, incorporated a rich symbolic language, the square and compass, the all-seeing eye, the pillars, that bears a striking resemblance to the Templar use of architectural and symbolic indexing. While a direct historical link is difficult to prove, the philosophical connection is powerful. The Masonic emphasis on preserving esoteric knowledge through ritual and graded initiation mirrors the Templar blend of written and oral tradition. It is highly plausible that fragments of Templar indexing principles, perhaps concerning sacred geometry or organizational structure, filtered into these new societies, repurposed for a new era of secrecy and brotherhood. Over the subsequent centuries, alleged discoveries have only added to the mystery. In the 1700s, a document known as the Chinon Parchment was found deep in the Vatican secret archives, recording the absolution of the Templar leadership by Pope Clement V, a fact that contradicted the official narrative of their guilt. Its discovery was a historical bombshell, proving that the Church's own indexed records held a suppressed truth. More recently, in 2001, the historian Barbara Frail found this very parchment, misfiled and forgotten, a testament to how even the best indexing systems can fail over time. In the 1950s, a curious lead cross was discovered in a French village, inscribed with cryptic symbols that some cryptographers believe could be a key to a Templar cipher. Each of these finds, whether verified or not, is a piece of a vast, scattered jigsaw puzzle. The enduring allure of the Templar indexes lies precisely in this elusiveness. They were designed to be resilient, to be fragmented, and to require a key for understanding. That key is lost, leaving us with a historical echo of a system so advanced that its fragments continue to tantalize, suggesting that the full map to the Templars' intellectual empire is still out there, waiting for the right symbols to be read in the right order. Decrypting the silent language of the Templars is a painstaking craft that blends the analytical rigor of a codebreaker with the intuitive eye of an art historian. Modern investigators approaching a potential Templar document don't have a Rosetta Stone to guide them. They have a puzzle where most of the pieces are missing. The first and most fundamental challenge is the sheer fragmentary nature of the evidence. We are not working with complete archives but with scattered survivors, a single page from a ledger, a worn-out map fragment, a stone carving weathered by centuries of rain. Each of these pieces is a lonely island, divorced from the vast informational continent it once belonged to. A symbol on one document might be perfectly clear in its meaning, but the same symbol on another, without its original contextual partners, becomes an ambiguous riddle. This forces researchers to operate with a degree of humility, understanding that any interpretation is a best-guess hypothesis based on incomplete data, a reconstruction of a magnificent cathedral from a handful of scattered bricks. One of the most powerful tools in the cryptographer's arsenal for tackling the Templars' linguistic codes is a technique called frequency analysis. This method operates on a simple but powerful principle. In any given language, certain letters or combinations of letters appear with predictable regularity. In English, for example, the letter E is the most common, followed by T and A. A codebreaker will take an encrypted text and count the frequency of each symbol. The symbol that appears most often is likely standing in for the most common letter in the underlying language. This process continues, using known patterns like common word endings or short words like the, or, and, to slowly reverse engineer the substitution cipher. For the Templars, who likely used a variety of languages, this becomes a multi-layered problem. A cryptographer must first determine which language the original text was written in, Latin, Old French, or something else, before frequency analysis can even begin. This technique successfully cracked a simple reversal cipher found in the Templar trial documents, where the alphabet was written backwards, but more complex codes would have used shifting alphabets or null characters, designed specifically to thwart this kind of analysis. Beyond raw text, the Templars' heavy reliance on symbols demands a different investigative approach, comparative symbolism. Here, the historian acts less like a mathematician and more like a detective comparing fingerprints. The goal is to take an unknown Templar symbol and search for its visual twin or close relative in other, better understood medieval contexts. A specific geometric pattern carved into a Templar church portal, might be compared to the same pattern found in a contemporary Byzantine manuscript, a Jewish Kabbalistic text, or even a Romanesque cathedral built by a completely different order. If that symbol has a known meaning in those other contexts, it provides a compelling clue to its potential meaning for the Templars. This method requires an encyclopedic knowledge of medieval iconography across cultures. For instance, a recurring motif of two knights sharing a single horse, a symbol of the order's early poverty, is well documented. But a more obscure floral pattern might be decoded by finding it in an illuminated herbal manuscript, where it identifies a specific plant with medicinal or symbolic properties, suggesting the Templars used it to tag documents related to healing or perhaps even a specific geographic region where that plant grew. This comparative work is crucial because the same symbol can have radically different meanings across cultures and time. A five-pointed star or pentagram in one context might be a Christian symbol for the 5 wounds of Christ, while in another it could represent pagan elements or later occult concepts. Without the context provided by comparing it to its usage in other undisputed works from the same period, it is dangerously easy to project modern interpretations onto medieval mindsets, a pitfall that has fueled countless conspiracy theories. The risk of misinterpretation is the constant shadow hanging over this entire field. A researcher might spend years building a convincing case that a particular set of symbols represents a map to a hidden treasure, only to discover a newly uncovered document that proves it was simply a standard accounting notation for livestock. The desire to find grand, world-altering secrets can sometimes override the more mundane but historically accurate reality of their meticulous bureaucracy. Despite these challenges, there have been quiet victories. One of the most significant successes has been the decipherment of certain financial records. By cross-referencing fragmented Templar ledgers with the well-kept royal accounts of figures like King Henry III of England, historians have managed to crack some of their economic codes. They identified symbols that consistently correlated with specific types of transactions, like loans secured against future wool harvests or payments for the hire of mercenary crossbowmen. In one case, a document covered in seemingly random numerals and abbreviations was finally understood to be a shipping manifest. The numbers, when paired with geographic symbols discovered on a separate map fragment, revealed the cargo, destination, and departure schedule for a galley sailing from Marseille to Cyprus. This wasn't a treasure map, but its decryption was far more valuable to historians. It provided a concrete, verifiable window into the day-to-day operational genius that made the order so powerful, proving that their greatest secret was not gold, but the flawless system they used to manage it. So what can a 700-year-old order of warrior monks possibly teach us in our age of cloud storage and artificial intelligence? The answer is quite a lot. The core challenges they faced: how to protect valuable information from loss, how to find it quickly under pressure, and how to ensure it remains understandable over time, are the very same problems we grapple with today. Their solutions, forged in a world without computers, offer a powerful set of timeless principles that are perhaps more relevant now than ever before. The first and perhaps most crucial lesson is the absolute necessity of redundancy. The Templars never stored their most critical knowledge in just one place. Their archives were distributed across their entire network, from Jerusalem to London. If a commandery was burned, its local records might be lost, but the core information existed elsewhere, tagged with the same symbols and codes, allowing the system to be rebuilt. In our digital world, we often make the fatal mistake of believing that because something is on our computer or in a single cloud service, it is safe. But hard drives fail, cloud services can go bankrupt or suffer catastrophic outages, and accounts can be hacked and locked. the Templar lesson is to always have a backup of your backup. This means employing the 3-2-1 rule. Keep at least 3 copies of your data on 2 different types of media with 1 copy stored off-site. For your most precious digital photos or vital work documents, this might mean the original on your computer, a copy on an external hard drive in your home, and another copy encrypted in a cloud storage service. They understood that true security doesn't come from a single, impenetrable vault, but from a resilient, distributed system where the loss of any one part is not a catastrophe. Their approach to secrecy also holds profound lessons for our modern concept of encryption and data privacy. The Templars didn't just hide their secrets, they designed them to be useless if intercepted. A financial document used linguistic encryption, switching languages to confuse readers, while a map used symbolic tags that were meaningless without the oral key held by initiated members. This is the medieval equivalent of two-factor authentication. In our lives, this translates to moving beyond simple passwords. We should be using password managers to generate and store complex, unique passwords for every site and service. We should enable two-factor authentication wherever it is offered, adding that second dynamic key that makes a stolen password worthless. For our most sensitive files, whether personal financial records or a business plan, simple encryption tools can render the data unreadable to anyone without the passphrase. The Templars teach us that security is not about building a higher wall, but about ensuring that even if someone scales the wall, what they find is indecipherable and worthless to them. It's about building intelligence into the information itself, not just the lock on the door. Perhaps their most elegant innovation was their commitment to user-friendly design. Their indexing system of symbols and geographic codes was a universal language that any initiated brother could understand instantly, regardless of his native tongue. They created an intuitive, visual interface for their vast archive long before the concept of a graphical user interface existed. We can apply this same principle to our own digital chaos. How many of us have a desktop littered with unnamed files like Document Final v2 New Really Final? docx? The Templar method would be to implement a consistent, clear tagging and naming convention. This could be as simple as using dates in a standard format like YMMDD at the start of file names, which automatically forces chronological order. For photos, it means taking the time to add metadata tags, people's names, locations, events, so that a search for Grand Canyon 2022 instantly brings up the right pictures. For a business, it means creating a shared company-wide system for naming and organizing digital projects so that any employee can find what they need without having to ask the original creator. Their system worked because it was designed for the user, reducing cognitive load and enabling lightning-fast retrieval. Our digital tools are powerful, but they require us to impose our own order upon them to be truly effective. Finally, the Templars demonstrate the incredible wisdom of blending the digital with the analog. They didn't rely solely on fragile parchment. They backed up their most vital knowledge in the most durable medium they had, stone and human memory. In our rush towards a fully digital existence, we risk creating a digital dark age, where file formats become obsolete and storage media degrade, rendering our photos and documents unreadable to future generations. The Templars would advise a hybrid approach. For your most irreplaceable items like family photos, birth certificates, or a handwritten letter from a loved one, create a physical analog backup. Print a photo album, keep important documents in a fireproof safe, and don't underestimate the power of the human brain. Share your family stories orally, pass down the knowledge of how to access those digital archives and teach the next generation the passwords to the family digital vault. This blend of high-tech and no-tech creates a robust, multi-layered defense against loss, ensuring that our most cherished knowledge, like theirs, has the best possible chance of outlasting the empires of technology that will inevitably rise and fall. Their legacy is a challenge to us all to be more thoughtful curators of our own information, to build systems that are not just efficient for today, but durable enough for the centuries to come. While the Templars themselves were dismantled, the intellectual DNA of their indexing system refused to vanish, weaving itself silently but profoundly into the very fabric of European thought and culture. Their methods, designed for survival, became a hidden catalyst for the explosion of learning that would define the Renaissance. As scholars began to shake off the dust of the Dark Ages, they were faced with a deluge of rediscovered classical texts from Greek and Roman antiquity, pouring into Europe from the Muslim world and the crumbling Byzantine Empire. This was a chaos of knowledge not unlike what the Templars themselves had faced: a mountain of unstructured, complex information in multiple languages. The humanist scholars tasked with making sense of it all needed a way to organize, cross-reference, and retrieve this wisdom, and the most advanced model available was the one refined by the military orders. The Templars and their rivals the Hospitallers had perfected the art of creating finding aids and cross-referenced catalogues for their vast libraries. Renaissance librarians and scholars adopted these techniques, creating detailed subject indexes and alphabetical catalogues for the great collections of the Vatican or the Medici family. This systematic approach to knowledge management, this idea that information should be tagged and organized for efficient retrieval, was a necessary precondition for the scholarly breakthroughs of the era. It allowed a thinker like Leonardo da Vinci to jump from studying anatomy to designing hydraulics to sketching flight, because the knowledge in each field was becoming more accessible and interconnected. The Templars' pragmatic system for managing operational data had, ironically, helped lay the groundwork for the flowering of humanist thought and the scientific revolution. This legacy of organized knowledge was directly inherited by the institutions that rose from the Templars' ashes. The most direct lineage is seen in the Order of Christ in Portugal, which was essentially the Templars under a new name, granted by a king who refused to persecute them. This order not only inherited the Templars' assets but also their archives and, crucially, their navigational and cartographic knowledge. Prince Henry the Navigator, a Grand Master of the Order of Christ in the 15th century, used this inherited, indexed geographical intelligence to plan the Portuguese voyages of discovery. The maps, with their coded symbols for currents, winds, and safe harbors, a direct evolution of Templar geographic indexing, were the state secrets that gave Portugal its edge in navigating the African coast and opening the sea route to India. Similarly, the Knights Hospitaller, who absorbed much of the Templars' physical property, also inherited their administrative practices. On the island of Malta, their new headquarters, the Hospitallers ran a complex, multinational operation that required the same meticulous record-keeping and cross-referencing of supplies, personnel, and intelligence that the Templars had mastered. The system lived on, proving that the true power was not in the knights themselves, but in the durable, transferable method they had developed for managing complexity. Beyond these direct successors, the Templar ethos of preserving knowledge against all odds played a quiet but vital role in safeguarding classical learning during some of history's most turbulent centuries. While the fall of Constantinople in 1453 is often hailed as the event that sent Greek scholars fleeing west with precious manuscripts, the Templars had been actively engaged in this preservation work for hundreds of years prior. Their presence in the Levant and their contacts with Byzantine and Islamic scholars placed them at a critical crossroads. They were in a unique position to collect, copy, and translate texts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and architecture that might otherwise have been lost to the relentless violence of the Crusades and the gradual decay of time. Their fortified scriptoria, deep within castles designed to withstand siege, acted as unlikely safe houses for this fragile stream of knowledge. While they were warriors first and foremost, their role as de facto librarians and archivists helped ensure that a continuous thread of ancient wisdom survived the chaos of the medieval period, providing the raw material that Renaissance thinkers would later use to rebuild the intellectual world. Their greatest historical impact may not have been a battle they won, but a manuscript they saved. This rich, complex history, however, has been largely overshadowed by a far more potent and enduring cultural force, the myth. From the moment of their dissolution, the Templars became a blank canvas onto which every generation has projected its own fantasies and fears. The absence of a clear ending, the missing treasure, the vanished archives, the whispered secrets created a vacuum perfect for conspiracy theories. In the 18th century, fringe Masonic groups began to claim a direct descent from the exiled Templars, weaving their symbolism into elaborate initiation rituals and positing that the order had possessed ancient esoteric secrets about the true nature of divinity. This narrative was electrifyingly popular, transforming the Templars from defunct bankers into mystical guardians of a hidden truth. This mythos exploded into popular culture in the 20th and 21st centuries, from the paranoid thrillers of authors like Umberto Eco in Foucault's Pendulum to the blockbuster adventure of Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code and the immersive historical playground of the Assassin's Creed video game franchise. These stories, while fictional, have been phenomenally successful in reshaping public perception, making the Templars synonymous with shadowy global conspiracies and religious cover-ups, a far cry from the pragmatic logistical masters they truly were. This romanticization, while often historically inaccurate, speaks to a deep and powerful cultural need. We are drawn to the Templar story because it is a perfect allegory for our own times. Their struggle to protect information in a dangerous world mirrors our modern anxieties about data privacy, digital security, and the fragility of truth in an age of misinformation. The idea of a dedicated, knowledgeable few preserving wisdom against ignorant or malevolent forces is a profoundly appealing narrative. So, while historians may decry the inaccuracies, the enduring power of the Templar myth is itself a form of historical impact. It has made them one of the most recognizable and endlessly fascinating elements of the medieval world, ensuring their story continues to be told, debated, and reimagined. Their indexing system was indeed a cultural artifact, but so is the legend that grew from its ashes, a testament to the fact that how we choose to remember and imagine the past can be just as powerful and shaping as the historical truth itself. This drive to protect information at all costs forces us to confront a timeless ethical dilemma, one the Templars navigated in stone and parchment, and we now face in silicon and code. Where is the line between necessary secrecy and dangerous obscurity? The Templars created an impenetrable system to safeguard their operations, but in doing so, they also walled off vast amounts of knowledge from the world. Their secrecy was a shield against their enemies, but it also meant that advancements in navigation, finance, and governance they might have developed remained locked within the order, potentially slowing broader human progress. They made a calculated choice that the survival of their institution and the safety of their clients' financial data justified this level of opacity. This raises a profound question that echoes in our boardrooms and government halls today. Does the right to privacy inherently include the right to absolute secrecy? And if so, who gets to make that call? We can see this tension mirrored perfectly in our modern digital landscape. The Templars' use of encryption to protect financial transactions is the direct ancestor of the end-to-end encryption used by messaging apps and banks today. Their argument would be familiar to any contemporary cybersecurity expert. Strong encryption is a fundamental tool for protecting individual privacy and securing sensitive data from malicious actors. Yet, this very tool creates a serious challenge for society. Law enforcement and security agencies argue that absolute, unbreakable encryption creates warrant-proof spaces where criminal activity, from terrorism to child exploitation, can flourish undetected and unpunished. The Templars' system, designed to thwart a hostile king, would be just as effective at thwarting a modern warrant. This presents us with an almost impossible balancing act. How do we uphold the individual's right to private communication without inadvertently building a perfect sanctuary for those who would do us harm? The Knight's legacy suggests there is no easy answer, only a perpetual and necessary struggle to find an equilibrium. This extends beyond law enforcement into the very nature of power in an information age. The Templars' control over the financial secrets of Europe's elite granted them immense, unelected influence. They were not a government, but their knowledge gave them leverage over kings and popes. Today, we see a similar dynamic playing out with massive technology corporations. These companies possess something far more valuable than gold: data. They have meticulously indexed our desires, our friendships, our movements, and our fears. This vast archive of human behavior grants them a form of power that is both seductive and terrifying. Like the Templars, they argue this data is used to provide better, more efficient services. But also like the Templars, the concentration of such detailed knowledge in the hands of a few private entities raises urgent questions about accountability and consent. Are we, as a society, comfortable with a world where a handful of corporate entities possess a more detailed index of our lives than any government or religious order in history? The methods of indexing themselves are not neutral. They are shaped by the values and biases of their creators. The Templars categorized their world through a lens of faith, finance, and military strategy. Their indexes would have been useless to a contemporary artist or poet seeking inspiration, because those categories simply weren't a priority for the order. Today, the algorithms that index our digital world are created by teams of programmers with their own unconscious biases. When a search engine ranks information or a social media feed curates reality, it is applying a hidden set of organizational principles, a modern symbolic tag that prioritizes some types of content over others. This can create filter bubbles, reinforce stereotypes, and silently shape public discourse on a massive scale. The Templars teach us that every indexing system is ultimately a value statement, a declaration of what its creators believe is important, connected, and worthy of preservation. The ethical challenge for us is to ensure our own digital indexes are built with transparency and a commitment to pluralism, rather than the single-minded pursuit of profit or power that might have guided a medieval knight banker. Ultimately, the story of the Templar indexes is a powerful reminder that information is never just inert data. It is a form of potential energy that can be harnessed for creation or destruction. Their choices to encrypt, to conceal, to distribute were deeply moral ones with real-world consequences. As we continue to build the indexing systems of the future, from the metaverse to artificial intelligence, we are faced with the same responsibilities. Who should have access to the master keys of our digital kingdom? What knowledge should be forever sealed away, and what must be brought into the light for the benefit of all? The Templars' world of parchment and fortresses may be long gone, but the essential questions they grappled with about power, privacy, and the preservation of knowledge are now, more than ever, the defining questions of our own age. From the silent language of symbols etched into parchment to the geographic codes that turned maps into living intelligence briefings, the Knights Templar engineered a system for preserving knowledge that was nothing short of revolutionary. Their use of chronological indexing created a predictive framework for understanding time itself, while their mastery of linguistic encryption ensured their most sensitive secrets remained hidden in plain sight. They understood that durability required redundancy, backing up their written records with a robust oral tradition and embedding their most vital indexes into the very stone of their chapels and fortresses. This multi-layered, brilliantly decentralized approach was not designed for convenience. It was engineered for survival. It was their ultimate weapon against the relentless threats of fire, war, and political annihilation, a shield that allowed their accumulated wisdom to endure long after their order was officially dissolved and their last Grand Master had fallen. When we reflect on their ingenuity, it's humbling to consider the immense constraints they faced. Without the instant communication of the internet, the vast storage of the cloud, or the durability of digital copies, they had only parchment, ink, horse, and ship. Yet, within those limitations, they devised solutions that feel astonishingly modern. Their symbolic metadata prefigured our digital file tags. Their distributed network of commanderies mirrored the redundancy of cloud servers, and their encrypted communications were a manual form of modern cybersecurity. They were grappling with the same core human problems we face today: how to find information quickly, protect it fiercely, and ensure it remains understandable across time and distance. Their world was one of candlelight and vellum, but their thinking was centuries ahead of its time, proving that the most powerful technology is not the tool itself, but the ingenuity of the mind that wields it. The true relevance of their struggle echoes in our own digital age. We now face our own deluge of information and our own existential threats to its preservation. Data rot, format obsolescence, and the fragility of digital storage are our modern equivalents of fire and decay. The Templars' strategies offer us timeless lessons: the critical importance of backing up our most precious data in multiple formats and locations, the wisdom of using clear and consistent organizational systems that others can understand, and the value of sometimes stepping away from the digital to preserve our stories in physical, tangible forms, whether that's a printed photo album or conversations shared with the next generation. They teach us that preserving knowledge is an active, continuous process, a responsibility we all share. As the old adage reminds us, what is written remains, what is remembered changes. The Templars dedicated themselves to both imperatives, creating a system that honored the permanence of the written word while investing in the living, adaptive power of human memory. Their legacy invites us to become more thoughtful curators of our own knowledge, to build systems that are not just for us, but for those who will come after. If this journey into their hidden world of indexes has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to explore further. Perhaps you might visit a site steeped in their history, like the serene Temple Church in London or the majestic Convent of Christ in Toma, Portugal, and see if you can spot the silent language of symbols for yourself. Or maybe simply pick up a book on medieval history and discover the countless other ways our ancestors solved problems with breathtaking creativity. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of one of history's most fascinating intellectual puzzles. The story of the Templars is a powerful reminder that knowledge is our most enduring legacy, and the ways we choose to protect it will always define us. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What aspect of their system did you find most ingenious? And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the past, please like this video and subscribe for more journeys into the lost corners of history. Until